who is more powerful than I is coming. I am not worthy to untie the thong of his sandals. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire. His winnowing fork is in his hand to clear his threshing floor, and to gather the wheat into his granary. But the chaff he will burn with unquenchable fire. Now when all the people were baptized, and when Jesus also had been baptized and was praying, the heaven was opened, and the Holy Spirit descended upon him in bodily form like a dove. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my Son, the Beloved. With you I am well pleased." It was time. Jesus was 29 years old, and he knew that which he had been called to should begin. He waited for so long, always having these feelings that he was made for something special, always remembering the stories that his mother had told him of how he was chosen and how she was chosen to give birth to him, and all of these events that had transpired, and he knew that the time had come, that the time was right, that he should go and accept his mission, as it were, that he should start his ministry and go forth and claim his title as the Messiah. And so as all these people were in a line making their way up to John the Baptist, as he took them one by one into the muddy waters and dipped them down and brought them back up, Jesus thought to himself, I wonder what's going to happen. Certainly something big is going to happen, because this is a moment that I've been waiting for a long time, and it's a moment that my people have been waiting for, whether they know it or not. He slowly makes his way up closer and closer to John, getting more and more excited and nervous as he goes. Certainly there would be some loud acclamation. Certainly, who knows, maybe the earth would shake, or the heavens would open, or a voice from God would boom down, or the Holy Spirit would descend like a dove, or something huge must happen in front of all these people. And he wondered so much what it might be. Finally it was his turn. And he got up there, and he and John just looked at each other. Just a nod of assent. And John took him as Jesus dropped his robe and went with nothing but his loincloth. And John put his hand in the small of his back. He took his other hand up here so Jesus could hold on to it for support, so he could plug his nose as he went down into the muddy, swirling waters of the Jordan. And he dipped him down inside the water. And he pulled him back out. And Jesus' eyes were covered with that muddy, silty water, and he was wiping his eyes, and the sun was bright and shining through those little drops of water, and kind of blinding, and he stood there shaking the water out of his ears and hair. He waited. Nothing happened. There was no voice. There was no sound. John didn't say anything. The people didn't say anything. And certainly there was no voice from God. Now imagine if this is how it had gone down. Imagine if this was how Jesus' baptism really was. A lot of times, apocryphal passages are added to text to make them seem more miraculous, or holy, or special. So what if Jesus was baptized just like everybody else? And the end result was the same as everybody else. What if Jesus would have been disappointed that the heavens didn't open, that he didn't hear some big booming voice announcing his affirmation, his approval from God? What if Jesus would have given up right there and right then, because he didn't have the approval that he thought he needed? The story obviously would have been much different. I can remember growing up, I would have ideas of what I wanted to be, and I genuinely wanted to be those things. Corporate lawyer, or whatever, right? Business owner, this, that, and the other, and because they sounded cool. They have cool titles, and people seemed to like those titles, and so I thought, yeah, I like this. And so I'd throw something out there and see what people's response was. And if, oh, that's awesome, yeah, you got to do that, that's definitely you. Well, then I'd work harder at it. If there was no response, I'd be like, maybe that wasn't it. And I'd forget about it a day later. Just keep going and going and going in circles until I heard that one thing that I got the most approval out of, the most affirmation. But see, as it were, Jesus continued with the story, obviously. It didn't end there. He didn't stop there. Jesus went into the water a carpenter, and he came back out a Messiah. But he wasn't the Messiah that people expected. He certainly wasn't the Messiah that John expected. John was talking about this guy who was going to corral this brood of vipers and show him who's boss. He was going to separate the good and the bad and burn out all the bad guys, whether it was the religious Jews or whether it was the occupying Roman Empire. He was going to take care of business. He was going to mount a revolt, a rebellion, chase those bad Romans out of their land, the land that God had promised them. But no, that wasn't the kind of Messiah that Jesus became. He wasn't the kind of Messiah that any of the people expected. He wasn't a king. He didn't rule over the people. For all intents and purposes, he was a failure. He got himself killed. What glory is there in that? He got silenced by the very powers that they thought he was born to overcome. But that's also not true. Because Jesus' mission as a Messiah was not to overpower or to overcome, but it was for individuals to be able to thrive and live and have hope and have love, despite the fact that they were occupied by an oppressor. That was Jesus' mission. And it wasn't up to him whether he succeeded or not. It was up to the disciples. It was up to the people who heard the message and learned from him. Would they go forward and do the things that they had been taught? Jesus could talk until he's blue in the face, but if nobody ever heard the lesson, and nobody ever acted on it, then what good was it? It were just empty words falling in silent ears. Now he could have become dejected in that too. So many times he had to tell his disciples, how many times do I need to tell you? How long must I be with you, you wicked generation? When are you finally going to get it? That this thing is not going to magically happen. You are going to have to get your feet wet. You're going to have to get your hands dirty. Remember when Jesus was up on the mountain during the Transfiguration and Peter wanted to build a house for he and Elijah and Moses. Meanwhile, the rest of the disciples were down there and the man's son was tormented. When Jesus came down, so what kind of disciples are these? They couldn't even heal my son. They refused to do anything. And Jesus said, when are you going to get it? You have to do the work because I'm not going to always be with you. Quit expecting things of me because you're not going to get it. I taught you how to do it. It's time to get to work. And this was the recurring lesson that Jesus taught the disciples. But he certainly could have become dejected and said, you know what, heck with this. You guys don't listen to me. You don't do anything right. I'm done. I'm going back to carpentry. It's a lot better than that. This whole Messiah thing is just not cutting it for me. That certainly would have changed the story. Speaking of stories, I heard one the other day about a man named Stephen. Stephen wanted to be an artist in the worst way. And so he saved up his money and he moved to France. And he traveled the French countryside looking at all these inspiring landscapes, and he hung out in all these artist groups and just painted and painted and painted to his heart's content. And eventually he came across these young aristocrats, and they liked him. He seemed like a nice guy, kind of weird American, but that's okay. That's the kind of people that ended up in France anyway. So they kind of took him under his wing and said, hey, we're having a masquerade, a costume party tonight out at this castle. You should join us. Oh, he got so excited. He ran home and he started making this costume. Oh, he was going to be completely original. He was going to knock their socks off with his artistic talent. So he got all these foam claws and this red paint and these antennae and all these things, and he made himself a red lobster costume. He went to the ball, the masquerade, and he rang the bell, and this butler comes out and checks the list, and his name was on there, and let him in, and he comes strutting in and checking out the crowds of people, and open the doors, and there's all the people dancing, and he about dropped dead of a heart attack. Oh yes, it was a costume party, but it was themed. It was medieval attire, and here he was, a big 6'4" red lobster. Oops. Now he could have become utterly humiliated, which he did, but he could have tucked tail and run the other way because of his experience. He could have lost all hope. He could have become dejected. He could have said, oh my God, I've screwed up. Because certainly he wasn't going to get affirmation from that. But instead he said, you know what? I came 3 hours to come to this thing. I'm going to stay. And stay he did. And the people came over and talked to him, and they looked at him a little suspiciously, and what are you supposed to be? He says, I'm the court lobster. They got a good laugh out of that, and everything went well afterward. He ended up dancing with the Queen of Belgium that evening. And everybody not only liked his personality, but in the beginning, almost as a favor, because they liked him as a person, started buying his art. But then they found, as they continued to buy it, and he continued to work on his craft, they realized that they actually liked what he painted. He was actually really good. And from that, he was able to make a decent living. Now, I can't tell you, Stephen was actually so-and-so, like I usually do in my stories, because I don't know who Stephen was. But he did well for himself. He didn't turn the other way. He may have been scared, but he didn't let it get the best of him. But what about all of us, both as a congregation and both as individuals? What are the things that we feel called to, but we just don't feel like we've got the affirmation that we need? We just don't feel like there's enough people out there telling us, yeah, that's what you should be doing. You'd be awesome at that. I think it doesn't matter. Because sometimes other people don't get it like we get it. Nobody else can be us. Nobody else can hear that voice of God or feel that presence or whatever it is that wells up within us, telling us that this is who we were made to be at this time, when we accept that mission, whatever it may be. So if you go down into the water and you come up and there's no voice and you're blinded with the water and the bright sun and nobody is shouting and nobody is saying, way to go, keep it up, it doesn't matter. Keep going. Because it's your life.